Let's keep in mind the big picture. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And as always, thank you to you who are subscribing. You fine 30 people who are subscribing to this podcast. You make the podcast all worthwhile. Really, I have a gigantic ego. It would only take one of you to make this podcast worthwhile. But the fact that there are 30 of you feeds my ego and turns me into an undeniable egomaniac. So thank you. Thank you. Anybody new who's listening, I'm normally not that much of a jerk. If you like what you hear today, like and subscribe. If you don't like what you hear today, well, don't like and subscribe. It's a free world and a free internet, at least for now. Anyways, I open by saying the big picture. What do I mean? Well, I had a conversation with my dad the other day because we have conversations like these. And if you don't have conversations like these with somebody, find somebody to have these sort of broader picture conversations with. Not only will they make you a more intelligent human being, it's fun. Like some people you have and you talk about, the weather and you talk about sports and you talk about the little things. And yes, you should talk about sports with everybody because I love sports. I love sports, therefore you should talk about it. I don't know how that helps me, but it does. Again, egomaniac. Why else would I stick a microphone in my face? Sidebar. If you see somebody with a microphone in their face, it does not mean you should listen to what they're saying. If you do listen, do your own research. Take it with a grain of salt. Because this microphone here that I just moved out of place, this was $10. This stand here, another 10. For $20, I have a microphone set, and I basically have a recording studio in my apartment. So, for $20, I can just scream my opinion into the internet, and I've become just as valid as everybody else. Keep that in mind. Keep that in perspective. Wow, didn't know that segue was going to come back around, but it did. Anyways, egomaniac continuing. I was having a conversation with my dad about perspective. And the writers and actors that I know are not going to be happy about this because I was having a conversation about the writers and actors strike, and I was getting frustrated with somebody. They were talking to me about, they had recently gone through a trauma. That's a word that gets used a lot these days. It's a very popular buzzword. And I'm going to say buzzword because I think there's a division in certain circles about big T trauma and little t trauma. I don't like using the word trauma for every bad thing that ever happens in your life. Right? Because bad things happen. Not all of them are life-defining moments. I stubbed my toe. That's not trauma. Well, it's physical trauma. It's physical trauma, but like I'm not gonna have nightmares about the fact that I stubbed my toe. So I was talking to somebody and they were discussing a trauma they had recently. They were in the midst of. They were going through, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you feeling okay? Is everything okay with your family?" They're like, yeah, all that's fine. I'm in good health. I have a job. I'm paying my bills, all that good stuff. I'm like, so what's going on? What happened? And they brought up the writers and actors strikes. Now the writer's strike is obviously over at this point, but they were discussing the writer's strike in the past tense and the actor's strike in the current tense. I was saying, oh, if you lost out on opportunities? Have you lost your job? What's going on? And they said just the existential nature of the strikes was the trauma. They were traumatized by what the industry was doing to them. The industry in particular was not doing anything in particular to them. The industry just striking. And so I called my dad, as I often do in these situations, because I am dumb and he is smart. Or rather, he is smart, and any intelligence I have, I typically have gained from garnering wisdom from my father. From my parents, I will say. My father in the most recent sense. And he and I began a conversation about perspective. My dad has a tendency when we talk to have a really good ability to take a real world concept, sort of explain the overarching concept behind it, and then bring it back and make it relatable. I don't know how he has this ability. He just does. And I appreciate it. But as he's talking through this, we start talking about the kind of nature of how perspective works and what is fair to expect of people and what is not fair to expect of people. And the concept that came out was that he said, Nick, one thing to remember for that person is that they may lead a very blessed life. And if you lead a blessed life and not a lot bad has happened to you, it is completely acceptable for you to have such a reaction to perhaps one of the first bad things that has ever happened to you. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't feel good for stuff like that to happen to you. But then he told me a story. I will not relate the story here because it's really not my story to share. The point being, he got to the end of that story, and the example of perspective was so stark that even in my own life, which I had thought was far more cursed than the writer and actor person I was talking to, I realized how far from cursed I actually was. It blew my own life into perspective. This isn't to minimize what someone is going through, but it simply is a matter of the importance of keeping your own life in perspective and remembering what I've said before, that you have to stand up because the world is still turning. You have to deal with what you're going through because the world is still turning. And you should keep things in as much perspective as possible. Now, for many people, and one of the things I've been scared about with these strikes is that the messaging has been such that instead of a business negotiation, it's turned into something that we glom all of our existential and personal crises onto. Ladies and gentlemen, the writers and actors strikes, they'll eventually end in contracts. The writer's strike has just ended in a contract that makes every writer I've seen talk about it incredibly happy. This was always a business negotiation. It was never anything more. The actors strike, it's the same thing. You're fighting for a fair contract, yes, but you're not fighting for anything else. You're not fighting to overturn the current economic system. You're not fighting to get revenge on the billionaires you feel have wronged you. Keep the strikes in perspective. Because at the end of the day, if you believe it's traumatic, you have to go back to work with the people you're negotiating with. You can't hook your trauma onto them because they won't solve it. They have no desire to solve it. Truthfully, you shouldn't have a desire for them to solve it. Sometimes bad stuff happens. You don't deserve it. I've said that before. It's not because the universe or God has said it's your turn to get screwed. Just because bad stuff happens. If you need to go to therapy, find a way to get into therapy and work through it. I can tell you that therapists are very non-judgmental, and if your therapist is judgmental, find a different therapist. Remember, you can always get a second opinion. Frankly, you can always get a second opinion on this podcast. I just happen to have a microphone. Don't take my word for it. Go do some research. And just remember, keep everything in perspective. You'll live a happier, healthier life that way. That is a lesson that I am still learning. I haven't learned that. I am learning it. Which is weird. I know what the answer is. I'm still learning how to practice it. I'm on this journey with you. Don't be me. Be better than me. Learn it quicker. That's my 2 cents. It's about all I got for you. If you like what I said, like and subscribe. If you like what I said, you already subscribed, just leave a comment. Tell me what you liked about it. Tell me what you didn't like about it. I can't improve unless you tell me. And if you didn't like it, well, I feel for you. Because I'm a giant egomaniac and I think I'm pretty awesome. And on that note, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.